She was just a waitress, a young black woman working late shifts in one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, invisible to the people she served, and underestimated by the ones who gave her orders. But one winter night, everything changed. When Aaliyah Brooks was assigned to serve the table of a powerful millionaire and his elegant, deaf grandmother, no one expected her to do more than pour the wine and smile politely. Yet, in a world obsessed with status, she chose something simple: humanity. With the quiet grace of her hands, she spoke in a language no one else at that table could understand. And in that moment, she reached beyond prejudice and power, straight into the heart of an old woman who had long been forgotten by her own family. But what happens when kindness exposes cruelty? When a woman who's been silenced all her life decides to fight back, not with anger, but with truth? This isn't just a story about a waitress. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong, every soul who's ever swallowed their voice to survive. It's about how compassion can shatter arrogance and how silence, when spoken with purpose, can echo louder than words. Would you have had the courage to do what she did? Would you have risked everything just to be heard? If this story already touches your heart, don't scroll away. Hit like, share, and stay tuned before watching the full story below. The Silver Garden shimmered under the Manhattan skyline like a glass jewel. At 9 o'clock on a Thursday evening, the dining room pulsed with quiet luxury crystal chandeliers dripping light onto marble floors, strings of soft jazz floating above the murmur of expensive conversations. Every plate was a small sculpture, every napkin folded like origami. And yet, behind the polished smiles and hushed elegance, tension lived in the air, sharp as the edge of a broken glass. Aaliyah Brooks balanced a tray of empty wine glasses on her arm. The sleeves of her white uniform were crisp, but her palms were damp. 2 years working here had taught her one thing: perfection wasn't a goal, it was a weapon. From across the room, Claudia Voss watched her like a hawk in heels. The manager's blonde hair was tied into a severe knot, her diamond watch catching every flicker of light. She had a way of speaking that made people feel smaller. "Brooks," Claudia called, her tone slicing through the soft hum of the restaurant. "Yes, ma'am. Be careful with that tray. Those glasses cost more than your weekly paycheck." A few waiters chuckled quietly. Aaliyah smiled the kind of smile that hid the sting and walked away. Inside, her heartbeat thudded against her ribs. In the back corridor, near the service door, she set the tray down. The scent of roasted garlic and wine filled the air. A line cook glanced at her and whispered, "Don't let her get to you. She's been like that for years." Aaliyah nodded. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Not really. The truth was, the Silver Garden had never been a place for women like her. She knew it from the first day she stepped in, how the hostess hesitated before handing her the uniform, how the other servers exchanged glances. They smiled, but their eyes said something else. "You don't belong here." She had learned to move quietly, to keep her head down, to make herself small enough not to be noticed, but skilled enough not to be replaced. Tonight, though, she felt the air shift. Something heavy was waiting in the dark corners of the evening. As she crossed the kitchen threshold, Claudia appeared suddenly, holding a bottle of red wine. "You forgot to polish this," she said sharply. "I did. Ma'am, it's already been wiped." "Really?" Claudia tilted the bottle, inspecting it under the light. Then, with a deliberate flick of her wrist, she let it slip. The bottle shattered against the tile. Red wine splashed across the floor, dark and dramatic like spilled blood. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Claudia said, coolly, "Clean that up." Every cook turned to look. The dishwasher froze mid-motion. Aaliyah swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." She crouched down, gathering the glass shards, her hands trembling slightly. "Next time," Claudia continued, her voice low but sharp, "remember your place. The Silver Garden isn't the kind of restaurant that lets anyone serve its VIPs." The words hung heavy in the air. Anyone. Aaliyah looked up. Their eyes met blue against brown, and for the first time, she didn't look away. "With all due respect, ma'am," she said softly, "I was hired to serve tables, not stay hidden behind dishes." A muscle twitched in Claudia's jaw. "We'll see how long that lasts." She turned on her heels, leaving the scent of expensive perfume behind. When the kitchen door swung shut, the silence that followed was thick, almost reverent. Aaliyah exhaled slowly. Her palms were bleeding from tiny cuts. She wrapped a napkin around them, pressed hard, and whispered to herself, "Breathe, girl. Just breathe." She leaned against the cold counter, watching her reflection in a steel-surfaced tired eyes. Steady posture. People often mistook her calm for weakness. They never saw the storm that lived just beneath. Her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "How's work tonight? Did you eat?" She smiled faintly and typed back, "It's fine. Busy. Don't wait up. I'll bring you something." Caleb was her younger brother, 18, smart, funny, and deaf. Since the explosion that took their parents when he was 5, he was the reason she worked double shifts and rented a tiny studio 20 blocks from the restaurant. Every paycheck kept his tuition at the community college paid. She turned off her phone and went back to work. The dining room needed to be reset for the late-night guests. As she placed fresh glasses on the tables, she caught sight of the reservation board near the host stand. Tomorrow night's VIP list glowed in gold letters. The Mercer family. Private table, 7-8:30 p.m. Her chest tightened. She'd heard the name before the Mercers owned hotels, foundations, entire city blocks. They were the kind of clients who made careers or ended them. She brushed her hand against the edge of the tablecloth, smoothing a wrinkle that wasn't there. Claudia's voice still echoed in her mind. Not the kind of place that lets anyone serve its VIPs. But as she stood there, something flickered in her eyes, not anger, not fear, but quiet resolve. Because Aaliyah Brooks had spent her whole life proving people wrong. And she had a secret no one in the Silver Garden could imagine, a secret that, before the week was over, would turn this glittering restaurant upside down. She looked out the tall windows toward the lights of Central Park. The city stretched beyond the glass, indifferent, endless, and full of second chances. Aaliyah straightened her posture, adjusted her apron, and whispered, almost like a promise, "Tomorrow's a new shift," and somewhere deep inside, something whispered back, "Tomorrow's the beginning." The following evening arrived wrapped in the amber glow of the city. Manhattan felt softer at dusk, as if even the skyscrapers leaned closer to listen. Inside the Silver Garden, candles were lit, the chandeliers dimmed to a golden hush. The restaurant smelled of truffle butter, roasted thyme, and polished ambition. Aaliyah Brooks buttoned her uniform slowly, her fingers trembling just a little. She could still feel the sting of yesterday's humiliation, though she'd buried it under layers of calm. In the mirror of the staff locker room, she fixed her bun tighter, checked her collar, and whispered, "It's just another night, just another table." But she knew it wasn't. At 8:20 p.m. Claudia Voss swept into the kitchen like a gust of perfume and control. Her heels clicked against the tile. "Listen up," she announced, her voice slicing through the clatter of plates. Table 7 is reserved for the Mercer family. Mr. Ethan Mercer, his wife, and his grandmother. They're not just clients, they're royalty. If anything goes wrong tonight, it's on me, and I don't forgive easily." She scanned the room, and her gaze landed on Aaliyah. "You'll stay on clearing duty. No serving that table." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." Aaliyah lowered her eyes, but inside, something stirred. Minutes later, the doors to the main dining hall opened, and a wave of quiet traveled through the staff. The Mercers had arrived. Ethan Mercer walked in first, tall and clean-cut, his navy suit fitting him like it was designed around his breath. His wife, Rebecca, followed, a slim woman in a silver dress who barely looked up from her phone. But it was the elderly woman between them who drew Aaliyah's gaze. Evelyn Mercer was small, elegant, her hair silver and pinned into a neat twist. Her blue eyes moved quickly, curious but unfocused, like she was reading the world through light instead of sound. Aaliyah recognized that look. She'd seen it countless times in Caleb, when people talked around him instead of to him, that quiet isolation of being in a room full of voices but hearing none. Aaliyah carried a tray past the table, pretending not to look, but her eyes kept drifting back. She watched Evelyn's hands, the way they twitched slightly as her grandson and his wife spoke to each other, not to her. The older woman's smile was polite, but distant. At the service station, Aaliyah placed her tray down just as Claudia walked by. "Eyes front." "Brooks," she hissed, "don't even think about stepping near that table." "Yes, ma'am." But when Claudia left, fate or maybe conscience decided otherwise. One of the junior servers spilled a glass of sparkling water near table 7. The poor boy froze. Claudia was nowhere in sight. The guest turned, waiting, without thinking. Aaliyah stepped forward with a clean towel and calm precision. "I'm so sorry about that," she said softly, kneeling to wipe the spill. "It'll just take a second." Ethan nodded politely. Rebecca barely looked up. Evelyn, however, tilted her head, watching Aaliyah with quiet curiosity. When Aaliyah finished, she looked up into those pale eyes and almost instinctively began to sign. "Good evening, ma'am. I hope you're enjoying your night." Evelyn's expression changed instantly. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted in surprise. Then, slowly, her wrinkled hands lifted, shaky but graceful. "You know sign language?" "Yes, ma'am." Aaliyah signed back, smiling. "I learned because my brother is deaf." A soundless gasp escaped the old woman. Tears shimmered in her eyes. For a second, Aaliyah feared she had done something wrong. But then Evelyn began signing quickly, her movements alive, full of warmth. "It's been years since anyone talked to me this way. They all just talk around me. Thank you." Aaliyah's throat tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who was staring, astonished. Rebecca had finally put her phone down. The table, once formal and still, now felt alive. Aaliyah continued serving, now speaking and signing at once, describing dishes with slow, clear gestures. She introduced the wine, asked Evelyn directly for her choice, and waited as the woman thought and replied. "I'd love something dry." She signed, "Not sweet." "We have a California Chardonnay that's light but crisp." Aaliyah replied, "It pairs beautifully with the salmon." "Perfect." Evelyn signed, smiling wide. For the next 30 minutes, the table filled with a warmth that even the candlelight couldn't match. Evelyn laughed, silently but fully, shaking her shoulders with delight as Aaliyah joked in signs about the size of the dessert portions. Ethan laughed too, leaning forward like a boy seeing his grandmother happy for the first time in ages. When Aaliyah walked away to fetch their wine, she could feel other servers watching her. Some looked curious, others cold. A few looked quietly impressed. At the bar counter, Claudia appeared out of nowhere, her voice dripping with control. "What are you doing?" "Serving table 7, ma'am. I told you not to." "Mr. Mercer requested it personally," Aaliyah replied calmly, meeting her manager's icy stare. Claudia's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Ethan's voice came from behind. "Yeah, everything's perfect. Thank you," he said, nodding at Aaliyah with genuine warmth. When he turned to his grandmother again, she was signing something to him slowly. He looked back at Aaliyah, visibly moved. "How did you learn that he asked when she returned with the bottle?" Aaliyah hesitated. "My brother, Caleb, was born hearing. When he was 5, a gas explosion took our parents, and his hearing. I was 16 then. Learning ASL was the only way we could survive together." Her voice was calm, almost steady, but her eyes glistened with unspoken memories. "He's in college now. I work here to help him stay there." Ethan said nothing for a moment. He simply nodded, quietly impressed. His wife looked away, uncomfortable, as if kindness made her restless. Evelyn reached out, touching Aaliyah's hand lightly. Her fingers trembled as she signed. "You're a strong girl. Your brother must be proud." Aaliyah smiled, her throat thick. "Thank you, ma'am. He's the reason I never give up." When she stepped back, she caught Claudia standing near the kitchen door, watching, her face twisted with something darker than anger, envy, maybe, or fear. The rest of the evening flowed like a calm river. Aaliyah stayed near, translating jokes between Evelyn and Ethan, making sure the elderly woman felt included. For once, Evelyn didn't just sit through dinner, she was part of it. By the time dessert came, Ethan leaned toward his grandmother. "You're glowing tonight, Grandma," he said gently. She smiled, hands moving, because someone finally remembered, "I have a voice." He looked at Aaliyah again, and there was gratitude in his eyes that words couldn't carry. When the Mercer family left, Evelyn pressed a folded napkin into Aaliyah's hand. Inside it was a note, written in shaky handwriting. "Thank you for speaking to me. You reminded me what kindness sounds like." As they walked out, Aaliyah stood still for a long moment, holding that note as if it were made of glass. Around her, the dining room sparkled as always, yet something in the air had changed, subtle, invisible, but real. In a place built on silence and judgment, she had made someone feel seen. But as the clock neared 10, she caught Claudia's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The manager was staring, her jaw tight, her smile too thin. Aaliyah recognized that look. It was the look of a storm building quietly, waiting for night to fall. She slipped the napkin into her pocket and went back to work, her pulse steady. Whatever came next, she would face it the way she always had, calm on the surface, fire underneath. Tomorrow, she knew, would not be just another night. It would be the night everything changed. Morning sunlight crept through the thin curtains of Aaliyah Brooks' apartment, turning the tiny kitchen into a wash of honey-colored light. The coffee pot hissed quietly on the counter. In the living room, Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching something in his notebook, lines that slowly formed into a pair of hands, spelling hope in sign language. Aaliyah leaned against the doorway, her uniform hanging from the back of a chair. She loved this hour, when the city hadn't fully woken up and silence still felt like safety. Caleb noticed her watching and lifted his hands, smiling. "You're up early," he signed. "Big shift tonight," she replied, moving her hands gracefully. "Important clients again." He raised an eyebrow. "That manager still giving you trouble?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Always. But I'll handle it, like always." Caleb put down his pencil and signed slowly. "You shouldn't have to keep handling it. You deserve better. Ali." She smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Better takes time, kid," she said aloud, knowing he'd read her lips. "And right now, we just need steady." He nodded, trusting her. She poured him a cup of cocoa, stirred her own coffee, and let herself look at the photo on the counter, their parents, smiling beside a rusty red pickup. The frame was cracked. The picture was 10 years old. It had been the explosion that took them. A gas leak in the house when Aaliyah was 16. Caleb was the one she pulled out, his tiny body limp, his ears bleeding from the blast. The sound of the sirens was the last thing she truly remembered hearing before the world became about surviving. She still remembered the silence after. The hospital waiting room that smelled like bleach and grief. The doctor's gentle voice. "Your brother can't hear any more. Miss Brooks, I'm sorry." That was the night she promised herself she would never let him feel alone inside that silence. She taught herself ASL from borrowed library books and late-night videos. She worked part-time cleaning offices downtown, saving every dollar. She became his translator, his teacher, his shield. And when people treated him like a problem to manage instead of a boy with a mind full of ideas, she learned something else. The quiet power of patience. Now, that same patience was the armor she wore at the Silver Garden. That afternoon, as she walked the 12 blocks to the restaurant, the air was heavy with the smell of rain. The sidewalks glistened, and the city moved around her in its usual rush of horns and footsteps. Her mind replayed the look in Evelyn Mercer's eyes the night before, that sudden spark of joy when someone finally spoke to her in her own language. It had been such a small thing, yet it felt enormous. Inside the restaurant, the tension was back. Claudia Voss was standing near the host stand, whispering with 2 other staff members. Their laughter stopped the moment Aaliyah entered. "Brooks," Claudia called, voice smooth and sharp. "In my office. Now." Aaliyah followed, her hands tucked neatly in front of her. The small glass office smelled like lemon cleaner and perfume. Claudia sat behind her desk, flipping through papers with unnecessary force. "You've made quite an impression," she said finally. "Mr. Mercer apparently couldn't stop praising you. His grandmother, too." Aaliyah said nothing. "But here's the thing," Claudia continued, leaning back in her chair. "I decide who serves which tables, not the customers. And definitely not you." "I understand," Aaliyah said quietly. "Do you?" Claudia's smile thinned. "Because it seems like you've gotten a little too comfortable lately. People like you often forget their place once someone rich smiles at them." Aaliyah froze. "People like me?" Claudia's voice dropped an octave. "Don't play innocent. You know exactly what I mean." She picked up a folder, slid it across the desk. "From now on, you'll be back on kitchen prep. 5 shifts, every day, including weekends." "That's not my schedule," Aaliyah said carefully. "It is now." Claudia's tone was final. "Consider it a reminder of where you stand." Aaliyah's pulse quickened, but she stayed still. Inside, a voice whispered, "Don't let her see it. Don't let her win." Then Claudia leaned forward, her smile turning cold. "Oh, and that brother of yours? The one in that special school? Those places can be expensive. It'd be a shame if you couldn't keep up the payments." The words hit like ice water. For a moment, Aaliyah couldn't breathe. Claudia smirked. "Think about that before you start believing you're untouchable." Aaliyah didn't answer. She just reached into her apron pocket, pressed record on her phone, and let Claudia's words hang in the air. When the manager finally dismissed her, Aaliyah stepped into the hallway, the phone still recording. She exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. Then, barely above a whisper, she spoke to herself. "Report 1. Direct threat. 4:17 p.m. for the rest of the shift." She worked in silence, chopping herbs, polishing dishes, watching the rain slide down the window pane like tears she wouldn't let fall. Every time Claudia walked by, Aaliyah smiled politely. She knew this game now cruelty disguised as professionalism, but she also knew something else. Every word, every insult, every threat was evidence. Late that night, when the restaurant emptied out and the lights dimmed, Aaliyah cleaned the counters with slow, precise movements. Her phone sat beside her, the red recording light glowing softly. She thought of Caleb's drawings, of his gentle hands forming words in the air. She thought of Evelyn Mercer's grateful smile, and she thought of the weight of all the moments like this one, the quiet indignities, the subtle cruelty people believed she wouldn't notice because she never shouted back. But silence, she had learned, was not the same as surrender. She took out a small notebook from her bag, one she'd kept since she was 16. Inside were pages of names, dates, small injustices she had endured and documented through the years, employers who paid her less, landlords who lied, teachers who told her she wasn't college material. She turned to a fresh page and wrote in neat, steady handwriting, "Silver Garden, Manager Claudia Voss. Incident verbal harassment and blackmail threat. Witness none. Recorded evidence. Yes." Then she closed the notebook, her fingers resting on the cover. The calm that came over her wasn't the calm of defeat. It was the calm before strategy. When she left the restaurant, the city had gone quiet. Steam rose from the manholes, the streets slick and empty. She walked home through the drizzle, the cool drops washing the night's bitterness from her skin. Halfway across 7th Avenue, she stopped at a crosswalk and looked up. In a high-rise window, she could see the reflection of herself, a small figure under a giant city sky. And she smiled, because she wasn't powerless. Not anymore. The next morning, before dawn, she brewed coffee and sat beside Caleb at the small kitchen table. He looked sleepy, his hair sticking up. She slid a plate of toast toward him. He noticed the bandage on her hand from the broken glass days earlier and frowned. She did that again. Didn't she? Aaliyah hesitated, then nodded. But it's okay. I have a plan he signed. Curious. She smiled. You'll see. Then she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Firm but gentle. No one gets to take our peace away. Caleb, not ever again. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he saw the look in her eyes, calm, fierce, unshakable. The same look she'd had when she pulled him out of the fire years ago. That night when she tied her apron again, she stood taller. The world might underestimate her, but that had always been her greatest advantage. By the end of the week, she promised herself, the truth would start to show, and this time, she'd have proof. Rain hammered the glass windows of the Silver Garden, a steady rhythm that blended with the soft hum of conversations and clinking cutlery. The restaurant was crowded, its golden light reflecting off wine glasses and jewelry. Yet for Aaliyah Brooks, the air felt colder than usual, heavy with something she couldn't name, but could sense like the faint rumble before a storm. It had been 3 days since her confrontation with Claudia Voss. 3 days since that quiet, venomous threat about her brother. Every shift since then had felt like walking on a frozen lake, careful with every step. But Aaliyah didn't break. She smiled when she needed to, moved with precision, and kept her head low while her phone stayed tucked in her apron pocket, always recording. Tonight was supposed to be routine, until she saw the reservation list. Table 7, Mercer family. Her heart skipped once, then steadied. Claudia's voice sliced through the air behind her. "Brooks, don't even think about going near that table. I'll assign someone else." "Yes, ma'am," Aaliyah said calmly. She didn't argue, didn't flinch, but her eyes followed the name on the list as if drawn by gravity. By 8:15 p. Ethan and Evelyn Mercer had arrived. Rebecca wasn't with them this time. The older woman walked slowly, leaning on her cane, her eyes lighting up when she spotted Aaliyah near the service station. She waved a little, smiling. Aaliyah instinctively raised her hand and signed discreetly. "Good evening, ma'am." Evelyn's grin widened. She touched her grandson's arm and began signing quickly. Ethan looked up, searching for Aaliyah. His expression softened when he saw her. But before anything more could happen, Claudia intercepted them with the sharp efficiency of a chess player protecting her queen. "Welcome back, Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Mercer. I'll be taking personal care of your table tonight." Aaliyah stepped back, forcing herself to breathe evenly. She focused on refilling water glasses at the far end of the room, though her ears caught every word from table 7. Claudia's voice floated through the air, warm, polite, rehearsed, but Aaliyah noticed Evelyn's eyes wandering, her hands twitching restlessly under the table. She couldn't hear, and Claudia wasn't bothering to look at her. It was the same quiet exclusion Aaliyah had seen all her life. 15 minutes passed. Claudia poured wine, arranged silverware, and spoke only to Ethan. The old woman's smile began to fade. Then, softly but firmly, Aaliyah heard Evelyn's voice, weak but clear. Where's the girl?" Claudia froze mid-step. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Grandma. She signed to me," Evelyn said louder, her words trembling but distinct. "She talked to me," Claudia stammered. "Of course, ma'am. Aaliyah is busy in the kitchen." "No," Ethan said. "Bring her out here." Aaliyah hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath until Claudia turned toward her, eyes flashing. "Well," the manager said through a clenched smile, "it seems you've been requested." Aaliyah stepped forward, steady and composed, though her pulse raced. Evelyn's face lit up instantly when she saw her. "You came back. Evelyn signed." "Of course, ma'am," Aaliyah replied. "I wouldn't miss the chance to see you smile again." Evelyn chuckled, her shoulders shaking. Ethan watched them, captivated. "Every time you speak with her," he said softly to Aaliyah, "she seems 10 years younger." "Maybe she just needed someone to listen differently," Aaliyah said, smiling faintly. Across the room, Claudia stood rigid, her hand tightening around the wine bottle. The evening continued like a song. Aaliyah translated, joked with Evelyn, even helped her taste dessert by describing each flavor with vivid gestures. Laughter followed, soft and genuine. For the first time, Ethan seemed at peace. He leaned back, sipping his drink, watching his grandmother glow with life. But when his gaze drifted toward Aaliyah, something else flickered curiosity admiration, maybe even guilt. He'd never realized, not really, how invisible people like her were until he saw the way she carried herself. Later. As Aaliyah cleared plates, Claudia appeared behind her, whispering sharply. Enjoying your little show. Aaliyah didn't turn around. Just doing my job. Don't play smart with me. You think winning over that old woman will change anything? You're still just a waitress. I know what I am, Aaliyah said quietly. Claudia's face flushed. You're done here after tonight? I'll make sure of it. She walked off before Aaliyah could respond. For a few moments, Aaliyah stood alone near the window. The rain outside blurred the city lights into soft, bleeding halos. She thought of Caleb, of how many times people like Claudia had told her what she couldn't be. But this time, she didn't feel small. When the dinner ended, Ethan shook her hand. Thank you. Miss Brooks, you made tonight special for my grandmother. I just did what anyone should. She said, not everyone does. Before she could answer, Evelyn reached out and touched Aaliyah's cheek gently, then pointed to her own chest and signed, You have a kind heart. Don't let anyone take that from you. Aaliyah blinked hard to keep her eyes dry. Thank you, ma'am, she whispered. After they left, Claudia cornered her near the back hall. You think you've made friends in high places, she hissed. You don't belong in this world. Brooks, not in theirs, not in mine. Aaliyah met her gaze evenly. Maybe I belong in a better one. The manager's face twisted. You're fired. There it was, the threat turned real. For a heartbeat, fear flickered in Aaliyah's chest. Then something colder replaced it. Resolve. Fine, she said softly. But you'll regret saying that. She turned, walked to her locker, and took her things. Claudia's laughter followed her down the hall, bitter and brittle. But what Claudia didn't notice was that Aaliyah's phone was still recording every word of their conversation, every insult. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city glistened, cleansed. Aaliyah stood under the awning, breathing in the smell of wet pavement and victory she couldn't quite name yet. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of it. At home. Caleb was asleep on the couch, the TV flickering quietly with captions rolling across the screen. She tucked a blanket over him, brushed his hair back, and sat beside him for a while. She thought of Evelyn Mercer's frail hands signing, You have a kind heart. She thought of Ethan's eyes, full of quiet respect. Then she took her phone, replayed Claudia's words, and let the venom remind her of everything she was fighting against. Tomorrow, she decided, she would call someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe the media, maybe Ethan Mercer himself. Because sometimes, silence wasn't noble. Sometimes, silence protected the wrong people. As dawn crept over the city, painting the windows pale gold, Aaliyah whispered to the still air, You tried to break me, but you just built my strength. And when her phone buzzed the next morning with an unknown number and a familiar voice saying, Miss Brooks, this is Ethan Mercer. I think we should talk. She knew it had begun, the real shift, the one she'd been waiting her whole life for. The following morning, the city felt quieter than usual. Aaliyah Brooks sat at the small cafe on the corner of Lexington and 81st, nursing a cup of black coffee gone cold. Her phone sat on the table, the screen dark but heavy with evidence, hours of recordings, each one more poisonous than the last. Every cruel word Claudia Voss had said was tucked neatly into digital permanence, waiting for the right moment. Outside, New York stirred awake. Taxis honked. Baristas shouted names, and the rhythm of life carried on as if injustice didn't happen every day. Aaliyah stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, watching her reflection ripple in the dark liquid. Then her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered, "Hello, Miss Brooks." The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, distinctly familiar. "This is Ethan Mercer. I hope I'm not calling too early." Aaliyah straightened instinctively. "No, sir. Of course not. I wanted to talk to you about last night," Ethan said, "and about what happened afterward. You left suddenly. My grandmother was quite upset when she realized you were gone." Aaliyah hesitated. "I'm sorry about that, Mr. Mercer. It wasn't exactly my choice." Ethan's tone shifted slightly, more serious. "I had a feeling it wasn't. I spoke with the restaurant owner this morning. He told me you're no longer employed there." "Yes, sir. Ms. Voss made sure of that." There was a long pause on the line, the kind that hummed with restrained anger. "Miss Brooks, would you be willing to meet me this afternoon? Somewhere quiet." Aaliyah looked out at the street, where he named a cafe not far from Central Park, the kind of place that served pastries shaped like art and coffee that cost more than a meal. She agreed, unsure whether to feel nervous or relieved. When she arrived, Ethan was already there, his coat draped neatly over the chair beside him. He looked less like a businessman today, more human somehow, no tie. Sleeves rolled up, eyes tired but kind. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing as she approached. "Of course, sir. Please, call me Ethan." She sat down, trying to ignore the glances of patrons who weren't used to seeing someone in a restaurant uniform sitting with a man like him. "I'll get right to it," Ethan said, leaning forward. "Claudia told me some things last night that didn't sit right. I've worked with people like her before. They think authority means cruelty, but I'd like to hear your side before I take any action." Aaliyah watched him carefully. There was no judgment in his eyes, only curiosity and concern. "She's been targeting me since the day I started," she said quietly. "Bad shifts, missing tips, public humiliation. I stayed quiet because I needed the job. But last week she crossed a line. She took out her phone and placed it on the table, pressing play. Claudia's voice poured through the speaker, sharp, hateful, crystal clear. "People like you need to understand there are limits. That little deaf brother of yours, it'd be a shame if something happened to his schooling." Ethan's expression hardened as the recording continued. A few nearby customers turned their heads. When it ended, he exhaled slowly, his jaw tight. "That's enough," he said quietly. "You don't need to say more. I've heard everything I need. I didn't bring this for pity." "Mr. Mercer," Aaliyah said, her voice calm but steady. "I brought it because people like her don't stop until they're made to. I'm tired of being quiet." He met her gaze. "You shouldn't have had to record that, but I'm glad you did." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a light drizzle began to fall, turning the street into a blur of reflections. Then Ethan said, "I want to help you, Aaliyah, not just to deal with Claudia, but to make sure this never happens to anyone else at that restaurant." She frowned slightly. "Help how I'm the majority investor in the Silver Garden," he said simply, "which means I decide who runs it and how." Aaliyah blinked, speechless for a moment. "I didn't know that. I usually stay hands-off," he continued. "But after hearing what you've been through and seeing how you treated my grandmother, I can't ignore this. I'd like you to come with me when I confront her." "Confront her?" "Yes, today." Her pulse jumped. "Are you sure I've never been more sure of anything?" For a moment, She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "If I go back there, she'll try to twist everything." "That's why I want you there," Ethan said firmly. "Because I want her to say those things to my face and yours." Aaliyah hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's end this." By afternoon, the rain had stopped, but the clouds lingered, low and gray. The Silver Garden looked different now, not grand, not intimidating, just a building filled with echoes of cruelty. Inside, Claudia was at her desk, typing furiously, when Ethan walked in, Aaliyah beside him. She froze, her smile mechanical. "Mr. Mercer," she said brightly. "What a surprise." "Miss Voss," Ethan replied evenly. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked toward Aaliyah, then back. "I don't see what this has to do with her." "Everything," he said. "Sit down." She didn't move. "If this is about that girl's behavior—" "I've already handled it," Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp. "By firing her, I acted within policy." Aaliyah pulled her phone from her pocket and pressed play. The room filled again with Claudia's venomous tone. The sound seemed to drain the color from her face. You recorded that illegally?" she stammered. "In New York," Ethan asked dryly. "It's a one-party consent state. Perfectly legal." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I trusted you with this place," Ethan continued. "I thought you understood professionalism, integrity. Instead, you used your authority to abuse people and to threaten an employee over her disabled brother. Do you realize what kind of lawsuit that could bring?" Claudia's voice trembled. "She's lying." Aaliyah stepped forward, calm but fierce. "Play the second file. Mr. Mercer." He did, this time. The recording was from the night before, Claudia's words echoing coldly. "You think winning over that old woman will change anything? You're still just a waitress." When it ended, silence filled the office. Outside, two servers stood frozen near the doorway, listening. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but deadly. "Claudia, I'm terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll receive a call from our legal team about the harassment claims. I suggest you cooperate." Claudia's composure shattered. "You can't do this. Because of her. She's nobody." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "She's the only person in this building who remembered my grandmother has a voice." That single sentence silenced the room. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten. For months she'd carried the weight of silence, and now the truth hung in the air, undeniable. Claudia's lips quivered. She grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, leaving only the faint hum of the air conditioner and the sound of rain returning outside. Ethan turned to Aaliyah. "You all right?" She nodded slowly, though her heart raced. "I think so." "Good, because I have another question for you." He smiled faintly. "How would you feel about coming to work for me officially? My grandmother insists she won't attend another family event unless you're there." Aaliyah blinked, stunned. "You're serious? Completely?" "We're starting a new inclusion initiative at the Mercer Foundation, training hospitality staff in sign language, accessibility, empathy. I'd like you to lead it." She couldn't speak for a moment. I don't have a degree." "You have something better," he said simply. "Experience, compassion, strength." Aaliyah's eyes glistened. For the first time in years, she felt the world shift in her favor. "Thank you," she whispered. As they walked out of the restaurant together, sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling gold over the wet pavement. The air smelled new again, clean, full of promise. Aaliyah slipped her phone back into her pocket, not as a weapon anymore, but as a reminder that truth, when spoken with courage, could change everything. And somewhere inside her, the silence she'd carried for years began to lift. For the first time in months, Aaliyah Brooks woke up without the heaviness of dread pressing on her chest. The morning sun streamed through her apartment window, painting streaks of gold across the worn linoleum floor. The city outside hummed with its usual noise traffic, sirens, a distant shout, but today it felt softer somehow. Caleb was already awake, making breakfast. The smell of toasted bread and eggs filled the small kitchen. He noticed her emerging from her room and smiled, signing quickly. "You look different, lighter." Aaliyah laughed softly, pouring herself coffee. "Maybe I am." "Did you sleep?" he asked, studying her face. "Like a rock," she said aloud, so he could read her lips. "You know what yesterday was? Something I didn't think I'd live to see." Caleb nodded slowly, his eyes full of quiet pride. "You stood up. You made them listen." Aaliyah sat down across from him, taking a bite of toast before signing back. "I didn't do it just for me. You were part of that fight, too. Everything I learned about patience, about strength, I learned from watching you." Caleb blushed, ducking his head. "You always say that, but I think you were born strong." She smiled and looked at the window. Outside, a delivery truck rolled by, splashing puddles onto the sidewalk. For a fleeting second, the world felt balanced again. Her phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with the text Ethan Mercer. "Hope you're free this afternoon. I'd like you to meet someone at the foundation." Aaliyah exhaled. Life didn't pause. It shifted. And now, she had to step into the new chapter she'd fought for. "Oh. Why?" That afternoon, she took the subway downtown. Her reflection in the window surprised her. She looked the same, but felt unrecognizable. Gone was the fear that used to curl in her stomach before every shift. The Mercer Foundation's office was nothing like the cold, polished perfection of the Silver Garden. The space breathed warmth, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows, soft music in the background, and employees chatting in open lounges. It felt human. Ethan met her at the reception with a smile. "Aaliyah," he greeted. "Glad you came." "Of course," she replied. "It feels strange not to be wearing an apron." He laughed lightly. "You've earned the right not to. Come, there's someone I want you to meet." He led her to a conference room overlooking Central Park. Inside, Evelyn Mercer sat in a plush chair, a cup of tea before her. The older woman's eyes brightened immediately when she saw Aaliyah. "Aaliyah," she signed with delight. "You came." Aaliyah signed back warmly. "Of course, ma'am. I missed you." Evelyn patted her hand as she sat beside her. "I told my grandson he should hire you the moment we met." He finally listened. Ethan chuckled. "Grandma's not exactly subtle." They all laughed a quiet, shared moment that felt like the beginning of something good. Over the next hour, Ethan explained the Foundation's new initiative, Project Bridge, a nationwide program that would train hospitality workers in communication inclusion sign language basics, empathy training, and accessibility awareness. "I want this to be more than a policy," Ethan said. "I want it to change how people think about connection." "You've already done that." "Aaliyah with my grandmother, with me, even with the staff who saw what happened. You didn't just serve a table, you built a bridge." Aaliyah listened, her heart swelling with disbelief and pride. You really think I can do this? I don't think, Ethan said simply. I know. Evelyn reached over and squeezed Aaliyah's hand. You'll do beautifully, she signed. You speak with your heart. People hear that, even if they can't hear sound. Tears stung the corners of Aaliyah's eyes, but she blinked them away. All right, she said quietly. Let's build something that lasts. The following weeks were a blur of movement. She traded her apron for a tailored blazer, her small apartment for an office filled with light. Her days were spent meeting designers, interpreters, and trainers. She wrote lesson plans, coordinated workshops, and recorded video tutorials teaching basic ASL phrases. She wasn't used to being called Director Brooks, but every time someone said it, she smiled. It wasn't just a title, it was proof. At night, she'd return home to Caleb, who followed her progress through notes and drawings. Sometimes he'd sign, You're changing things, Ali, for people like me. She would answer, For people like us. Yet even as success unfolded, a shadow lingered. News had spread about the Silver Garden incident. Blogs picked it up. Then local channels, then, inevitably, national news. Words like racial bias, abuse of power, and workplace discrimination flashed across headlines. Claudia Voss's name trended for all the wrong reasons. She released a statement claiming miscommunication and context taken out of proportion, but the recording said otherwise. No restaurant in the city wanted to hire her. One night, scrolling through her phone, Aaliyah saw a photo of Claudia in a small cafe in Queens. Tired, thinner, alone. She stared at the picture for a long time. For a moment, she expected to feel satisfaction. But what she felt instead was something quieter. Pity. Because now she understood some people built their power on fear, because they'd never learned what real strength was. And real strength was never cruel. Months passed. Project Bridge grew faster than anyone expected. Hotels across the state joined. Conferences invited her to speak. Every time she stood behind a podium, looking at rows of faces, some hearing, some deaf, she remembered where it all began. The dish pit, the broken plate, the humiliation she turned into purpose. Then one evening, she received an email from a restaurant owner in New Jersey. Dear Ms. Brooks, I recently hired a former manager named Claudia Voss. She mentioned you. She seems different now. She said you taught her something she'll never forget. Aaliyah stared at the message, a small, bittersweet smile forming. People could change, she supposed, but only after truth forced them to look at themselves. The next morning, she visited the Silver Garden. The restaurant had been remodeled, its new slogan written on the glass door, Every voice deserves to be heard. Inside, the staff greeted her with respect. Some even used simple ASL greetings. She walked through the dining room, remembering every corner of her past, the pain, the fear, and the quiet triumph that followed. Ethan joined her near the window overlooking the park. Feels different now, doesn't it? He asked. It feels alive, she said softly, like it finally remembers what kindness sounds like. He nodded. You gave it that sound. She looked out at the street, her reflection overlapping with the city beyond. For the first time, she didn't see the girl who had scrubbed dishes until midnight. She saw a woman who had rewritten her story, not by shouting louder, but by refusing to stay silent. That night, back home, Caleb handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed sketch, two hands forming the sign for family. You made us proud. He signed. Aaliyah hugged him tight, her heart full. We made it here together." And when she stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, she whispered to herself, "You can't silence what was born to speak." It was not revenge she had achieved, it was redemption. And sometimes that was the louder victory. 6 months later, autumn returned to New York. The trees along Central Park had begun to blush gold and crimson, the air crisp with the scent of roasted chestnuts and wet leaves. Inside her small but bright office at the Mercer Foundation, Aaliyah Brooks reviewed the latest progress report for Project Bridge. Since its launch, over 80 restaurants and hotels had joined the program. Dozens of employees across the city were learning sign language. Her inbox was filled with stories from workers who'd reconnected with customers they used to ignore small, quiet miracles happening one interaction at a time. Still, beneath the pride, something else stirred a restlessness she couldn't quite explain. Ethan Mercer knocked lightly on her door before peeking in. "Mind if I interrupt?" Aaliyah smiled. "You never need to ask." He stepped inside, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. "You've been buried in work again," he said, handing her one. "You should get out more. See what you've built. I see it every day," she said, half smiling, "in reports, in emails." He interrupted softly. "No, Aaliyah, I mean really see it, in people's faces." She hesitated, then nodded. Maybe he was right. Later that week, they visited one of the new partner restaurants in Brooklyn, a small, cozy place run by a woman named Teresa. When they walked in, Aaliyah noticed 2 waiters signing to a couple at a nearby table. Not fluently, but enough to make the customers laugh, to make them feel seen. Teresa came over, shaking Aaliyah's hand warmly. "You're the one who started all this," she said. "Before this program, I never realized how many customers we were ignoring just because they couldn't hear us. Now they come back every week." Aaliyah smiled, her eyes misting. "That's all I wanted," she said softly, a little understanding. As they left the restaurant, Ethan said quietly, "You did that?" Aaliyah shook her head. "We did that." He smiled. "You know, Grandma's been asking when you'll visit again. She's learned a few new signs, insists on showing you herself." Aaliyah laughed. "I'll never say no to her." For a while, everything felt right, balanced, but life, she knew, rarely stayed still for long. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at her office, handwritten, elegant cursive on cream paper. The signature at the bottom made her heart skip. Claudia Voss. She read it slowly. "Dear Aaliyah, you don't owe me forgiveness. I wouldn't blame you if you never thought of me again. But I wanted to tell you something. I found a new job, not in management, not in some fancy place. Just a small diner in Queens. The first week, a deaf couple came in. I froze. Then I remembered you. I remembered the way you spoke with your hands, how gentle you were with Mrs. Mercer. I tried signing thank you. They smiled. I cried in the kitchen afterward. I don't expect redemption, but you gave me a mirror. Aaliyah, I saw what kind of person I'd become. I don't like her. So, I'm trying to be better. Thank you not for what you did to me, but for what you showed me. Sincerely, Claudia." Aaliyah sat back in her chair, the paper trembling in her hand. For a long time, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she folded the letter and slipped it into her notebook, the same one where she used to record injustices. It felt like a full circle, that notebook, once filled with anger and fear, now held something different, closure. That evening, she met Ethan and Evelyn at their townhouse. Evelyn greeted her at the door, signing enthusiastically. "I practiced all week. Show me Aaliyah," signed back, laughing. The older woman signed slowly, proudly. "You are family?" Aaliyah blinked away tears. "You're mine too," she said softly. Dinner was warm and unpretentious: roasted chicken, potatoes, and Evelyn's favorite sweet tea. "Between bites," Ethan said, "we're hosting an awards gala next month. We'd like you to share your story." Aaliyah froze mid-sip. "My story?" "Yes," he said gently. "People need to hear it, not just the polished version. The truth." She hesitated. "You really think anyone wants to hear about a waitress who got bullied and fired?" Evelyn reached over, tapping her hand. "No." She signed firmly. "They want to hear about the woman who turned pain into purpose." Aaliyah smiled faintly, her throat tight. "Okay, I'll do it." The night of the gala came faster than she expected. The ballroom at the Mercer Foundation shimmered with light crystal chandeliers, gold linens, the hum of conversation. Guests in tailored suits and glittering dresses filled the room. When her name was called, Aaliyah stepped onto the stage. The microphone gleamed under the lights. For a moment, she froze the weight of so many eyes pressing down on her. Then she saw Ethan in the front row, Evelyn beside him, smiling proudly. She took a deep breath. "I used to think silence was safety," she began, her voice steady, "that if I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed quiet, life would eventually be kind. But silence can be a cage. It doesn't protect you. It just hides you." The room was still. I worked in a restaurant where my silence became someone else's weapon. I was insulted, humiliated, threatened, but I wasn't alone. My little brother who can't hear taught me something powerful, that language is more than words. It's kindness. It's patience. It's listening when others don't. Her voice wavered, but she continued. "So, when I met a deaf grandmother one night, I didn't just serve her dinner. I spoke to her in the language of understanding. That small act changed both our lives, and eventually, it changed a whole company." She looked out over the audience, many wiping tears quietly. "Project Bridge isn't about sign language," she said softly. "It's about connection. It's about remembering that every person, no matter their voice, their color, or their circumstance, deserves to be heard." She paused, letting the words settle. "I didn't win this fight alone. The truth is, none of us do. But when we stand up, even in small ways, we start a ripple. And sometimes, those ripples become waves that change everything." Applause erupted. Standing, roaring, Ethan stood, clapping the loudest. Evelyn's hands moved gracefully in applause, signing proud. Tears filled Aaliyah's eyes as she stepped down, her heart light and full. After the gala, as guests mingled, a woman approached her, older, with familiar eyes. "Aaliyah," the woman said softly, "it's been a while." It took Aaliyah a moment to recognize her. Claudia Voss. Her hair was shorter, her face bare of makeup, her eyes softer. Aaliyah froze, unsure what to feel. "I didn't come to cause trouble," Claudia said quickly. "I just wanted to see you speak. You were incredible." "Claudia, I meant what I said in the letter," Claudia continued. "I can't erase what I did, but I wanted to thank you. You changed me. I didn't realize how much pain I was carrying until I saw what kindness looked like in someone else." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Aaliyah said quietly, "I believe people can change. But change has to mean something. Claudia nodded. It does. I promise it does. Aaliyah hesitated, then extended her hand. Claudia took it, trembling. For a brief second, the past didn't matter, only the lesson that came from it. When Claudia left, Ethan joined Aaliyah by the window. You all right? She nodded. Yeah, I think I am. He smiled. You know, you've done more good than you realize. She looked out at the city lights, shimmering like constellations. Maybe, but I think the real good comes when people really listen. And for the first time in her life, Aaliyah felt truly heard. Winter crept quietly into New York, brushing every building and park bench with frost. The days were shorter now, the sky pale and cold, but the Mercer Foundation's office glowed warm with holiday lights. Inside, garlands hung across door frames, and laughter spilled from the break room where the staff was decorating a small Christmas tree. Aaliyah Brooks stood by her office window, watching snow fall onto the city below. It had been nearly a year since that night of the Silver Garden, the night everything changed. The night her silence turned into a voice that would never again be ignored. Her phone buzzed softly, a text from Caleb. Can I come to your work today? I finished something for you. She smiled, typing back. Of course. Come by any time. Minutes later, he arrived taller now, more confident, his sketchbook tucked under one arm. He'd grown into himself, she thought, in the same way she had. When he entered the office, her team waved, greeting him in basic sign language. It still amazed her, this small, tangible proof of change. He signed. They all know how to talk to me now. It feels good. She nodded, her heart swelling. It's supposed to. He handed her the sketchbook and flipped to a page near the back. It was a charcoal drawing, detailed, emotional. A woman standing beneath a streetlight in the snow, her reflection glowing brighter than the light itself. Underneath it, he'd written in careful block letters, Sometimes, the light we carry is louder than any sound. Aaliyah stared at it, speechless. Then she looked up, eyes glistening. Caleb, it's beautiful. It's you. He signed simply. You helped people see in a different way. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Ethan Mercer stepped in, his scarf dusted with snow. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, smiling. Not at all, Aaliyah said warmly. We were just admiring my brother's latest masterpiece. Ethan leaned over the drawing, eyebrows raised. That's incredible, he said genuinely. You're quite the artist. Caleb smiled shyly. Signing. Thank you. Mr. Mercer. Ethan signed back slowly, a bit awkwardly. Call me Ethan. Caleb's grin widened, and Aaliyah laughed softly. Your sign language is getting better. Ethan shrugged. You inspire good teachers. Then, turning to her, speaking of which, are you ready for tonight? Aaliyah frowned playfully. Remind me what's tonight. The year-end celebration, he said. We're presenting the Foundation's Impact Award, and rumor has it you're the winner. Her mouth fell open slightly. What? No, that can't be right. Ethan chuckled. I wouldn't lie about that, Evelyn insisted, as if on cue. His grandmother appeared in the doorway, her face glowing with mischief. He's right, she signed, grinning. You're the heart of this place, Aaliyah. We all know it. Aaliyah's throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Just say thank you. Evelyn signed warmly. And wear something fancy for once. Everyone laughed. That evening, the Foundation's hall was transformed. Strings of soft lights hung from the ceiling, and tables were set with golden candles and small arrangements of white roses. The staff mingled in elegant dresses and suits, glasses clinking in quiet celebration. Ethan gave a short speech about the year's accomplishments, the growth of Project Bridge, the partnerships with schools, the hundreds of new trainees who now saw communication as connection, not inconvenience. Then he said, "But all of this began with one woman, someone who showed us that compassion can be a revolution, even in silence. Please join me in honoring this year's Impact Award recipient, Aaliyah Brooks." Applause thundered. Aaliyah stood, her pulse racing, and made her way to the stage. As she accepted the glass award, the lights shimmered around her. She took a deep breath, then spoke. "When I was little, my mama used to tell me, 'Don't let the world tell you how small you are. Show it how strong you are.' For a long time, I didn't understand that. I thought strength meant keeping quiet, enduring. But now I know strength is kindness, spoken out loud." Her eyes found Caleb in the crowd. "My brother taught me that love doesn't need sound to be heard. It just needs truth." The audience was silent, listening, moved. Every person in this room has the power to make someone feel seen. She continued, "And when we do that, when we truly see each other, we build a world where no one's left outside the conversation." Applause rose again, echoing like thunder. She smiled through tears. As she stepped off the stage, Evelyn wrapped her arms around her in a warm hug. "You've made me proud." She signed. "But more than that, you've made people listen." "Thank you," Aaliyah whispered. After the ceremony, she slipped outside for a moment of quiet. Snow was falling again, soft and steady, blanketing the streets in white. She stood there, letting the cold air kiss her cheeks. Ethan joined her, his breath fogging in the night air. "You always disappear after speeches," he teased gently. "I like the quiet," she said, smiling. "It reminds me where I started." He looked out at the city with her. "You've changed a lot of lives, Aaliyah." She shook her head softly. "Maybe, but I think what really changed was how I saw myself." He turned to her then, his expression gentle. "You deserve everything that's come your way." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the world slowed. Snow drifted between them, glowing under the streetlights. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He smiled faintly. "You didn't need me for that. You just needed someone to remind you it was okay to speak." They stood there a while longer, not needing words. The city buzzed faintly below, alive and unbothered by their stillness. Weeks later, in the first days of the new year, Aaliyah received another letter. This time, it came from a small town in Virginia. It was from a restaurant owner who had adopted Project Bridge. "Dear Ms. Brooks, a deaf veteran dined here last night. Our staff communicated with him using what we learned from your program. He cried when he realized he could finally order without pointing. Then he said something I'll never forget for the first time in years. I felt human again. That's because of you." Aaliyah set the letter down, her chest tightening with emotion. She thought of all the small acts, the gestures, the smiles, the moments of patience spreading outward like ripples across the world. It wasn't fame or success that filled her heart that morning. It was the quiet knowing that something she started in pain had become a source of light for others, and that was enough. One evening, as she and Caleb walked through Central Park, snow crunching beneath their boots, he signed, Do you ever think about the fire? The accident? Aaliyah paused. Sometimes, but not in the same way. Back then, it felt like an ending. Now I think maybe it was the beginning, the start of everything that led us here. He nodded. You saved me. She smiled gently. You saved me too. They stood beneath the bare trees, snowflakes catching in their hair. The city glowed around them, a million stories unfolding at once. Every window a different rhythm of life. And Aaliyah thought of all the people still walking through their own silence, unseen, unheard, waiting for someone to notice. Maybe, she thought, the point wasn't to end silence. Maybe it was to fill it with meaning. She reached out her hand to her brother. He took it, squeezing tight. Together, they walked toward the lights, their breath visible in the cold, their hearts warm. Above them, the first stars began to appear faint, then brighter, their glow steady and kind. Aaliyah looked up and whispered, Mama was right. Caleb glanced at her, signing, about what she smiled. The world never decides how strong you are. You do. And somewhere, between silence and snow, her voice found peace not in being loud, but in being true. The story of the waitress and the deaf grandmother had long left the restaurant walls. Now, it lived in hundreds of hearts in classrooms, kitchens, boardrooms, and quiet family dinners. And though Aaliyah Brooks never sought fame, her kindness became a language the world would remember, a language louder than sound. In life, we often think strength means shouting the loudest or fighting the hardest. But Aaliyah's story reminds us that real strength can live in quiet acts, a kind gesture, a patient word, or a moment of courage in the face of cruelty. Her journey from a humiliated waitress to a voice for inclusion shows that no act of empathy is ever wasted. When we choose compassion over pride and understanding over judgment, we not only heal ourselves, we help the world around us heal too. We all meet Victorias in our lives, people who underestimate us, hurt us, or try to silence us. But like Aaliyah, we have a choice to let bitterness define us, or to rise above it and turn pain into purpose. Her triumph was not revenge. It was transformation, the kind that reminds us that dignity doesn't come from power or wealth, but from how we treat others when no one's watching. So maybe the next time you meet someone struggling to be seen, you'll remember this story. You'll slow down, listen, and choose kindness, because even a whisper of empathy can change a life. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for believing that stories like this still matter. If this message moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to support more stories that remind us of the strength in humanity and the beauty of listening with our hearts.